I want to read you my favorite example of a pan. Now, panning your camera is basically just moving it to follow something. You know, we see this all the time in film and TV. You know, you're watching somebody run down the street and the camera is actually moving. Sometimes they even have it on a track and it's moving along with the person or the car. But here's a really great creative use of the pan. This is Charles Martin's novel, When Crickets Cry. It's a beautiful book. So Martin's character is standing on a sidewalk and he's watching a little girl who's selling lemonade, and her money flies into the street and she gets hit by a truck. Okay? Now, there's a lot of different ways you could film that. You could just be right there with this character on the sidewalk, and you could just have, from his point of view, watch this little girl right in front of him go into the street and get hit by a car. But take a look at how he sets this up to create this beautiful imagery, very cinematic, and to create this tension. A strong breeze fell down through the hills and blew east up Savannah Street. It ripped along the old brick buildings, up the sidewalk, through squeaky weather vanes and melodious wind chimes, and across Annie's lemonade stand, where it picked up her styrofoam cup and scattered almost $10 in change in currency across the street. She hopped off her folding chair and began chasing the paper money into the intersection. I saw it too late, and she never saw it at all. A bread delivery truck traveling right past me down South Main caught a green light and accelerated, creating a backfire and a puff of white smoke. I could hear its radio playing bluegrass and see the driver stuffing a Twinkie into his mouth as he turned through the intersection and held up his hand to block the sun. Then he must have seen the yellow of Annie's dress. He slammed on the brakes, locked up the back tires, and began spinning and hopping sideways. The farther the truck turned sideways, the more the tires hopped atop the asphalt. Annie turned to face the noise and froze. She dropped the money in her hand, which fluttered across the street like monarch butterflies, and lost control of her bladder. She never made a peep because the tightness in her throat squelched any sound. The driver screamed, "Oh, sweet Jesus, Annie." He turned the wheel as hard as it would turn and sent the back bumper of the truck into the right front panel of a parked Honda Accord. The truck deflected off the Honda just before the flat side of the panel truck hit Annie square in the chest. The noise of her body hitting the hollow side of that truck sounded like a cannon. She managed to raise one hand, taking most of the blow, and began rolling backward like a yellow bowling ball, her hat sailing in one direction, her legs and body flying in the other. She came to rest with a thud on the other side of the street beneath a Ford pickup. Her left forearm snapped in two like a toothpick. The tail end of the easterly breeze caught the bottom of her dress and blew it up over her face. She lay unmoving, pointed downhill, her yellow dress now spotted red. I got to her first, followed quickly by the lady behind the cash register who was crazy-eyed and screaming uncontrollably. Within 2 seconds, a crowd amassed. Annie's eyes were closed, her frame limp, and her skin translucent and white. Her tongue had collapsed into her airway and was choking her, causing her face to turn blue while her body faded to sheet white. Unsure whether her spinal cord has sustained injury, I held her neck still and used my handkerchief to pull her tongue forward, clearing her airway and allowing her lungs to suck in air. I knew even the slightest movement of her neck raised further injury to her spine, if indeed her spine was injured, but I had to clear the airway. No air, no life. Given my options, I chose. I hope you saw how beautiful that was. He starts with, not with the girl, but he starts with the wind blocks away. And he doesn't see that. I mean, he's using a very cinematic technique here. Obviously, his character doesn't see how the wind is going through the neighborhood and the wind weather vane and making all the bells ring and all that. But we could picture that so beautifully as this wind comes down the street. And I like that touch later on after Annie is hit, with the wind just sort of flicking up the hem of her dress to like the finality of what happened. Like the wind is done, you know. So it's really interesting. This character is sort of hiding out. He is a heart surgeon. He's a doctor, and nobody in the town knows he's a medical person, not even the reader. But the reader starts sensing that he obviously has some medical ability because of the way he's wording how he's assessing her injuries. So it's really brilliantly done. I also just like the way the dress sort of pulls up over her face, like the way you pull a sheet over somebody when they die. So Beautifully done. And so when you're planning out your scenes, don't try to think outside the box. Don't hold back and just write just what you see. Think of how you can, sort of bring your scene to life and have this amazing effect, this panning of this wind. Then you see then it hits you got the truck coming down, and he's noticing the truck driver stuffing the Twinkie, and he can tell that the glare is in this guy's eyes, and you just see it all, you see it all coming, and you see the whole picture of what happened here. No blame or anything, it's just, just sort of painting this picture. Colors are also a great element that you can use to great effect. Like, filmmakers often are very particular about color. I have a whole chapter in my book, Shoot Your Novel, on how you can use color and what different colors symbolize different things. So he's got the little touch of yellow here and there with her yellow dress, and she's like a yellow bowling ball rolling down the street. And those types of things bring your scenes to life, little details. I remember in an interview with Gabriel Garcia Marquez, where he was interviewed about his writing, and he spoke about how, being a journalist, he was trained to use these very specific details. And he said just by adding the color yellow in this one scene made it go from absolutely unbelievable to believable, just because by adding that one little touch, or instead of saying birds hit the window, he said 20 seagulls hit the window. So when you have specific details, it does, add that visual weight to making your scenes believable. Even if you're writing fantasy, it still works that way.